Hello everybody, we're here to present our analysis on Apple Inc. We decided to avoid this analysis by answering four specific questions. The first question being, what has been Apple's competitive advantage? After reading the case and some preliminary studies, we determined that Apple's competitive advantage is based on three main factors: innovation, appeal, and focus. I'm going to focus on innovation, its main components, and why it's a competitive advantage for Apple. First of all, Apple doesn't create products, it creates markets. Therefore, this boosts their sales. And we can definitely see that if we plot iPod net sales and iPad net sales versus time. We see that as the years progress, the sales for those both products, since they create a new market, increases. A second component of innovation is that since they create markets, they obtain first mover advantage. This means that they can charge prime prices for all their products. So we can clearly see that if we plot the iPad price and the iPod price versus time. And if we focus on the iPhone price, we see that by the time it was introduced to its current price, it has been reduced to almost by a factor of 2. So since there are new products and in a new market, they can charge prime prices for that. A third component of that is product integration. Basically, Apple designs all their products to work with synergy among them. So you can increase capability and boost capability if you have more than one Apple product. And also, it designs the product to be consumer content product. What this means is that these products continue to generate revenue, even though they have already been purchased by the customer. We can clearly see this in this graph. Basically, what this graph is plotting is the iPod-related products and services net sales versus years. So we see that as years progress, these sales have been gone up. And a final component, basically Apple's innovation is due to R&D. Basically, in this graph, what I'm plotting here is Apple's percentage, so R&D percentage divided by sales. So as you can see here, Apple has been consistently the one that's investing most in R&D of their sales.
In terms of its appeal, Apple has three significant advantages over its competitors. First of which is design. Apple is the first company to really make the computer more than just a machine, but a work of art. An example of this is the iMac, which was released in 1998, which incorporated both color, transparency, and an overall visual appeal to the client. Apple has also always made an effort to keep their designs very simple. A perfect example of this is the iPod. When the iPod was released, most music players had multiple buttons with just one function per button. However, the iPod, being a music player with increased functionality, had just one button for all of its functions. This simplicity carries out throughout all of Apple's product line, ranging from the plug-and-play capabilities of the iMac to the home button on the iPhone and the iPad. On top of its design, Apple also had a very unique and powerful marketing strategy. Apple is the first tech company to advertise its products in popular magazines, which is a very effective way of getting its products in the hands of home consumers. Another way in which Apple maintained its competitive advantage over the industry was its focus. Most technology companies these days have made their efforts to get into many different industries and as a result have spread themselves thin. Apple, however, has always had a limited product line and maintained their focus on what they do best. Apple is all about dominating the markets and the industries that it's in, and as a result, they stay out of industries that they are not able to fully invest themselves in. Apple has also always maintained its focus on the customer over the business. When Steve Jobs left the company in 1987, the company started to be run as a large corporation focused on money and the business, and it started performing very poorly. On the verge of bankruptcy in 1996, Steve Jobs was asked to return to the company, and he shifted the company's focus back to the customer experience and back to the innovation of its products, and very quickly got Apple back on its feet.
We're going to analyze the power of supplier, the power of buyer, the power of competitors, threat of new entry, and threat of substitution. First, the power of supplier. Suppliers had a really high impact on Apple's pricing. 80% of the microprocessors were produced by Intel and Microsoft. As a result, they had a high influence on its pricing. Second, the power of buyer. The power of buyer analyzes how buyers can drive prices up or down. If you have very few buyers, your buyers have a really high impact on your pricing. As a result, we can see that Apple's buyer had a high power on its product. Third, power of competitors. Did Apple had something that no one else was producing? Certainly not. Other manufacturers were producing very similar products, and as a result, the power of competitors was really high. 4. threat of substitution. Apple's competitors were running in an horizontal manufacturing way. As a result, they could offer products that were more versatile and could offer the same thing at a lower price than Apple computers. As a result, the threat of substitution was really high. For both the iPod and the iPhone, the power supply is low because Apple is now producing its own microprocessors. Also, many developers, 87% of them, are willing to create applications for the iOS. Second, the power of buyers. There are many buyers for this product. As a result, each buyer has a smaller power on the pricing of both the iPod and the iPhone, so the power of the buyer is low. Third, the threat of competitors. The threat of competitors for both the iPod and the iPhone is really high because they now compete against smartphones which offer very similar capabilities, and they also compete against online radio stations like Pandora and Spotify. Fourth, the power of substitution. There's a large variety of products that offer very similar capabilities in the market. As a result, the threat of substitution is really high. And the last one, the threat of new entrants, is really high because there are many manufacturers which use a horizontal strategy that can offer different things than the iPod and the iPhone at a very low price.
The iPad is an Apple tablet that was introduced in 2010 and has been on top of the market since, but has recently been stumbling because of newer tablets in the market. This is because the threat of rivalry, substitutes, and new entry are very high. There are just too many cheap alternatives to the iPad. The power of suppliers is low because, just like in the case of the iPhone or the iPod, Apple approves its apps and they make their own microprocessors for their iPad. And the power of a buyer is low because people are willing to pay for the tablet they want in this fairly new market. The iMac does not have a sustainable competitiveness because the threat of rivalry and substitutes are very high. Windows operating systems has been on top since forever. And the power of the suppliers is low because they make their own processors and their products are only for their computers. The power of the buyers is high because Apple owns such a small share of the computer market that they need their buyers. And the threat of new entry is very low because it is too expensive to enter the computer market.
In order to effectively analyze where the iPad stands in the business market now and where it will be in the future, we can look at a SWOT analysis chart, which lets us understand the iPad's strengths and weaknesses, threats to its future success, and its opportunities to grow in the market. The iPad has many strengths, most obviously being its innovative design and functionality. The iPad is sleek, stylish, and easy to use. Apple's research and development teams focus strictly on keeping the iPad the most innovative tablet on the market, and have successfully done so since its release. The iPad's operating system mirrors the operating system of all of Apple's handheld devices, including the iPhone and iPod, which makes it superior to other tablets in terms of desirability for Apple users. Finally, and possibly most importantly, Apple's brand name is hugely recognizable and plays a huge role in the iPad's success. However, for a future tablet owner, the iPad does present some weaknesses. Compared to other tablets, the iPad is by far the most expensive. You cannot load any other operating systems onto the iPad, which limits its usability to those who wish to make modifications to their tablet. The iPad, compared to other tablets on the market, does not allow the user to multitask and switch easily between applications. And finally, the iPad has no USB drive, whereas most tech devices, aside from Apple handheld devices, do. Although the iPad does have its weaknesses, there are opportunities for it to grow in the market. With the tablet market growing at an exponential pace and Apple's emphasis on innovation, the iPad has a clear opportunity to surpass other tablets. Apple also has the chance to change the iPad's capabilities so that it can become more compatible with other brands and universal devices like USB drives. The iPad also faces threats to its success in the future. Apple's patents for technology that expire will be easily accessed by companies and will add to the power of other tablets in the market. Specialized companies excelling in specific software like Google Maps will present more competition to the iPad. There will always exist a threat for new entry into the market by other technologies and tablet manufacturers, and price pressure from these companies will threaten the success of the iPad if they do not choose to lower the price at all. And finally, there will always exist the threat for economic slowdown, which would hurt any of these tablets.